Hello, welcome everybody. Today I'm going to be reviewing the new Earl Sweatshirt album. We finally get it after 4 years of waiting. We finally get Earl's most prolific, dense, and concept-driven album to date. And this motherfucker wants to name it some rap songs, but I don't even care. I can talk about this album for days, and I'm just so glad with what we finally got. Listening to Nowhere to Go and then The Mint, I didn't want Earl, just me knowing the fact, just listening to these two tracks, I knew that this was going to be Earl's most experimental album yet. But I didn't want him to get too weird and take away from the actual album itself. I feel like that was the only chance that we would get a bad album here. And the track Red Water, I feel like, is the only time where it got too weird for even Earl himself. The sample and the guy just going, I just feel like it did not mesh well at all. And it's weird because the guy's vocals by themselves without that terrible part, it was fire, and Earl was spitting his ass off. And he even has one of my favorite lines from the album where he says, "I got a stock on my shoulder," which, kind of represents a new life. And, Earl is trying to find a new life within himself because he's been so depressed for so many years. But I also felt like it represented a chip on his shoulder. And that is the reason why he's sinking, because he has such a chip on his shoulder from being one of the best and most anticipated rappers, that he feels like he's sinking within himself just based on the pressure. Now, listening to some rap songs, I feel like this isn't just a depression album. This is more of a reflection on depression. I honestly feel like listening to this, Earl is at one of his most stable points that we've seen him starting from his Future days. Throughout the album, Earl is stating the things that he did wrong, he did right, the people around him did wrong, as he battled through all of his shortcomings throughout depression. And when you get to the track December 24th, he says, "Bad apple daily clashing with my kinfolk, bad acid did damage to my mental." So he's reflecting on the fact that he himself, maybe because of his depression, again, I don't want to speak on another person's mental health, but just me basing it off the music, it seems like Earl was treating the people around him wrongly, and he wasn't happy with himself doing this, and what he was doing to other people just reflected back on him, on his depression. And this resorted to him doing drugs and abusing other substances, which just ignited more of his depression. So Earl being open enough to wanting to share these personal experiences with his fans and other people that listen to his music, I think it's what makes this album so special. This isn't just another depression album that when you're depressed you're going to listen to and it's just going to make you feel more sad. This is an album that reflects back on a man's past actions, and he's showing you the things that he did right, things that he did wrong, and how maybe you can look at your own life this way and you can apply it so you can see what you are doing yourself wrong. And sometimes when people are depressed, they feel like everything around them's going wrong, and they don't really look at themselves as to see, hey, maybe I'm the reason for my own problems. And this is something that I've always wanted more people to touch on, not just, hey, this is another depression album, I'm very depressed, but reflecting on your depression and going very personal with what you did, I think is something that is very much needed. The track Nowhere to Go is very funny when you listen to it within the track list, because it was one of the leading singles, and a lot of people were saying that it was very left field, very experimental, and people thought that, at first people didn't even fuck with it the way I was seeing it. And now when you look at and listen to it throughout the track listing, it's actually one of the catchiest, if not the catchiest song in the whole album. And it's very special when you're able to make such an experimental song and make it catchy. It kind of reminds me of The Money Store, because the reason why I love The Money Store so much is because, yes, it's experimental, but it's also very poppy. It's very catchy. You can just listen to these songs and just bang it in your car, but it's also very catchy. The hooks just grab you, and I think I got the same feeling with Nowhere to Go. And in this track, he also says, "Every nigga around me serves as a reminder that I gotta watch my step." And this just kind of ties back to what I was saying earlier. Earl is realizing the people that he's hanging around with, and maybe he has to change who he's with or where he's at, because the people around him, the people around you reflect who you are. So if the people around you are doing bad, you're most likely doing bad. And Earl is starting to realize that if the people around him are depressed or are sad, that's just going to reflect back on him. And again, this just sounds like someone who has truly overcome something and is realizing what he's doing. And now this is the kind of thing that Earl's going to be able to apply for the rest of his life, and it's going to probably stop further depression from developing, or depression itself from being as bad, because again, you're not going to be able to always control your depression or your sadness, but you can learn from your own mistakes and build within yourself. On the Way is easily one of my favorite beats. It might be tied with the outro for my favorite beat on this album. And again, it's just, when it's a rapper producer, you sometimes get the feeling that only Earl could rap over this, or only Big Crit could rap over this, or only LP could rap over this. And that's the feeling you get here. And it's very special when a rapper can make a 1-minute song or make a 2-minute song with no hook and just a long verse, and it feels like an entire song once you're done listening to it. That's one of the things that MF Doom and Madlib were able to do so well when it came to Mad Villainy, and that's a big reason why I love all of these tracks. And On the Way, he has the line where he says, "Mama says don't play with the scabs. It's safe to say I see the reason why I'm bleeding out," which again ties back to the first and second track. In the beginning of the album, Earl felt as if he didn't really know why he was sinking. He was asking himself, and then it's his mom telling him, hey, like, the reason why you're sinking is because you're scratching on your own scabs, you're hurting yourself, you're hanging around the wrong crowds, you're resorting to red water, which could signify alcohol, as in red wine. And we all know that Earl has in the past struggled with substance addiction. And it's because Earl is doing these own things to himself that he keeps sinking. And it's the quicker that he realizes this, is the quicker he can overcome this depression. In the track Eclipse, I think this is where you get the biggest MF Doom influence / comparisons here. You know, based on Earl's flow and also what he's saying, he has the line, "Play the game, no cheat code," which immediately reminded me of the line, "Only came to save the game like a memory card," off the Vaudeville Villain album, you know, from MF Doom. And, you know, I get the Mad Villainy comparisons. Like, sure, the tracks are short. Some of the beats sound sort of like them, but not too much, honestly. But honestly, at the end of the day, that's a pretty lazy comparison in my eyes. This is very much Earl's own album, and you can easily differentiate it from Mad Villainy, especially with the concepts. As much as I love Mad Villainy, it's not very concept driven. It's just a producer at his peak and an MC at his peak who are very unique and can't be replicated. Just dope beats, dope rhymes, dope stories all the way throughout. And I feel like some rap songs is very different. It's very concept driven. It's way more depressing. And I really think Earl made something here that can separate himself from all of his influences especially. And I even think that his previous albums, which even though they were concept driven, they're not as concept driven as this. Sure, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside. Just from the title, you already know what this album is going to be about. And even Endure is the whole concept of coming back after being in Samoa for 2 years was a very big part of that album. But this feels like the album that Earl's been wanting to make. He's much more stable-minded. He doesn't feel like his depression is wearing down on him. He's stable and he's wanting to make the music that he wants to make. And it's interesting because at this point in their careers, Earl and Tyler seem at very similar points. The music doesn't sound the same, but they're really making the albums that they wanted to make, which is the reason why Flower Boy is Tyler's best album. And some rap songs could very well go down as Earl's most brilliant work to date. In Eclipse, Earl says, "Say goodbye to my openness, total eclipse of my shine that I've grown to miss when holding shit in," which of course that ties into his depression. But I think the whole concept of him being an eclipse and the fact that he's a star and he has this depression getting in front of him as in eclipsing him, and the fact that when you have a solar eclipse, the outside part of the eclipse is the sun rays, which could kind of represent Earl on the outside being happy, but in the inside he's really feeling dark and eclipsed and depressed. But that's just the way he had to keep living his life. He had to keep holding shit in, like he said. And again, this just adds to the dance of this album. I mean, as much as I love Earl's earlier work, it wasn't as deep as this. And again, this is the importance of complex music. Every time I listen to this album, I find more shit, and it just makes me want to keep coming back to it. And again, I keep tying shit back to Tyler, but one of the reasons Tyler didn't answer a lot of questions when it came to answering questions about who was Sam and who was Wolf and how did Wolf tie into Sam and Thurnis Haley and all this shit when he was coming out with Wolf and the 3 sessions, it was because he wanted people to find it out on himself. He didn't want to just answer everything and have people's imaginations shrink. He wanted people to think, oh, this is what Tyler means, and then have another person completely say, oh, this is what Tyler meant with Sam, and bring him into the story. You know, leaving shit for interpretation adds into the whole imagination of the album, and this is why you need complex music. You know, when it comes to all these mumble rappers and shit, their music isn't complex at all. And that's the reason why you see Young Thug having to drop 3 albums or 4 albums a year. And it's because you listen to it, you digest it in a few listens, and then you move on. But with Earl, you can wait 4 years because it's gonna probably take you 4 years to fully understand it. And even at that point, you might not even fully understand it because it's your own interpretation of it. This is all my interpretation of it. And I could be completely wrong, but that's the beauty of having an album like this. In the track Azúcar or Sugar, which has one of my favorite beats, Earl has a line where it says, "Say to kill him this time, oy vey," which I think is a reference to Mac Miller, which adds to my own belief that this album was probably recorded over a long span. You know, I think some of these songs were made right after I Don't Like Shit Outside, and I think some of these songs were recorded midway through 2018. And again, this just gives me more reason to think that this is a reflection because he grew over this entire time. And when you start with Shattered Dreams and you end the album, you can see Earl's growth with his own depression and who he is as a person. And I think giving that shout out to Mac Miller, rest in peace, was very fucking dope. He also has a line where he says, "Niggas didn't have faith, so I stopped trying." And he has a little pause and he says, "Apologize, and we out of time." Which again, Earl was clearly giving up on himself. And this is something that any person who's gone through depression at one point has felt. You just want to give up. But when you listen to this kind of shit, I feel like it's very inspiring. You can listen to this and just want to keep going about your day, because if you know Earl made it through this shit, you know you can make it through this shit as well. The last track that Earl actually raps on is called Peanut, which is probably the most depressing track in the whole track list. Not only from the lyrics, but the flow itself. And he has a line, "This is not a phase," which kind of gives the listener the edge of, hey, maybe Earl still has depression or is still dealing with it. And again, this is not something that you just fully overcome. So it kind of is showing the listener like, hey, this is never gonna be fully solved, but you just keep working within yourself. And there's clearly some shit that Earl still has to go through. I love this beat, super eerie, super atmospheric. And then the album ends with Riot, which, 20 seconds in, you realize Earl isn't gonna rap over this and you get pissed the fuck off. But maybe it was just meant to be an instrumental because just by itself is dope as fuck. I fucking love this album. Shit, Earl, take 5 more years with your next one because this shit was fucking phenomenal. And I'm gonna keep bumping this shit these next 4 or 5 years, however long you take to make your next project. And I just can't wait to see what you do. Literally, I liked every track, even Redwater I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy it as much as the rest, but I still love it. This is a damn near perfect album, and I just can't wait to see what this man does again. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next time.